It started with a knock. Not the friendly kind. It was sharp, mechanical. The kind of knock that didn't wait for you to answer before judging everything about your life. Ethan pulled open the door and squinted into the morning glare. A bright orange paper fluttered in the breeze, stapled with surgical precision to the front of their porch post. Violation notice. Unapproved structure. Compliance required in 10 days. He didn't need to read the rest. He already knew what it was about. The ramp. The ramp was simple wooden, with a smooth steel railing. Ethan had built it himself. Every screw, every bracket, after Ava came home from the hospital. After the blast. After the months of silence and surgeries. It wasn't just a ramp. It was her independence. A voice snapped him out of the moment. Mrs. Cordell stood at the edge of the driveway, her clipboard tucked tightly against her beige blazer. Her lips, as always, pressed into a disapproving line. Ethan forced himself to breathe. "Morning," he muttered. "That structure," she said, nodding toward the ramp, "violates 3 of our community exterior aesthetic standards. Section 4B. Ethan blinked. "It's a wheelchair ramp." "My sister, she needs it." Cordell didn't flinch. "I understand. But this is a uniform neighborhood. Exceptions create visual dissonance. I've already sent the board's decision." He looked back at the notice, anger bubbling under his skin. "So, you want me to tear down the only way she can get in and out of the house?" Cordell offered a tight smile. "You're welcome to submit an appeal." Though they rarely pass, behind them the screen door creaked open. Ava wheeled herself out, her brown hair pulled into a tight braid, her uniform jacket slung over her shoulders. Her metals shimmered faintly in the sun. "I served 2 tours," she said, her voice steady. "Lost both legs saving people who didn't even know my name. And now I come home, and you're telling me my ramp offends your property values." Cordell blinked slowly. "I'm sorry for your service, Ms. Harper. But rules are rules. This neighborhood respects consistency." Ava tried to say more, but her breath caught. Her hands trembled slightly on the wheels. Then, as if someone had cut her strings, her body sagged forward. Ethan rushed to her. "Ava, Ava." He caught her before she hit the ground. Cordell stepped back, watching like it was a performance. Ethan's jaw clenched. He lifted his sister carefully, guiding her back into the house, his heart pounding. Inside, Ava sat silently, staring at the floor. The light from the window painted long lines across the rug. Her metals lay across her lap like weights. "I can't do this again," she whispered. Ethan crouched beside her. "We're not going anywhere. This is our home." She looked up at him, eyes raw. "It never feels like it." That night, Ethan stayed up late, rereading every rule in the HOA booklet. Some of it was vague. Too vague. But he wasn't going to let a group of paint-matching lawn obsessives dictate his sister's life. Not after everything she'd been through. The next morning, a neighbor named Tessa stopped by with cookies. She whispered that what happened yesterday wasn't right. That her father had served too, and seeing Ava like that made her feel sick. She said a few of the neighbors were quietly on their side, but everyone was scared of Cordell. She controlled the board, the fines, the mailroom, everything. Ethan thanked her. He watched as she walked back across the street and realized for the first time this wasn't just a notice. It was a warning shot. The ramp wasn't the problem. Ava was. Later that evening, Ava rolled out onto the porch again. She watched the sky change, orange to violet. Ethan sat beside her, staring at the silent houses across the road. "She thinks I'm an eyesore," Ava said quietly. Ethan didn't respond right away. Then he said, "She has no idea who you are." Ava looked at him, and for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Pride? Maybe. Or the ghost of it. But before either of them could speak again, headlights turned into their driveway. A sleek black car. HOA shoot. Cordell stepped out with another notice in hand. Ethan stood. This time, he didn't plan to stay quiet. Ethan didn't move. Cordell walked up the driveway as if she owned the street. Her heels clicked with each step, like punctuation marks carved into concrete. She held the new notice like it was a verdict. "This is your second and final warning," she said flatly. "The board has officially rejected your informal appeal. You have until Friday." Ava wheeled forward, her face calm but pale. "Friday?" Cordell tilted her head. After that, we'll be forced to take corrective action. That includes fines and formal removal of the structure by authorized personnel. Ethan stepped in front of Ava. Try touching that ramp, he said, voice low, and you'll be dealing with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the local news, and probably a lot more than that. Cordell raised an eyebrow. Threats, Mr. Harper? He smiled coldly. No, just facts. For a moment, silence pulsed in the air. Then Cordell turned, heels clicking again. She didn't look back. The ramp stayed. But something shifted. The next day, Ava didn't come out of her room. Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, hands clasped, staring at her unopened pill bottles. The house felt like it had lost oxygen. Memories clung to the walls, childhood photos, faded newspaper clippings from her award ceremonies. But the Ava he remembered wasn't in them anymore. Not really. He knocked gently on her door. You okay? No answer. He opened it slowly. Ava sat in her wheelchair back to the window, her uniform jacket still on. Her eyes were glassy, fixed on nothing. Ethan knelt beside her. Talk to me. She finally turned. They always said coming home would be the hard part. But I didn't think it would be this hard just to exist. He couldn't find words. None that mattered. That afternoon, Ethan posted a photo of Ava on the ramp. Just her silhouette against the sunset. No captions. No hashtags. He didn't want likes. He wanted someone, anyone, to see her. He didn't expect it to go viral. Within hours, it was shared by a local veteran group, then a regional news page. Then a nationally known veterans' rights advocate retweeted it with 3 words, asterisk, this is disgusting, asterisk. By midnight, Ethan's inbox had hundreds of messages. Soldiers, survivors, families with kids in wheelchairs, all saying the same thing, asterisk, we see her. We stand with her, asterisk. But not everyone was on their side. The HOA sent a letter the next morning accusing Ethan of defaming the neighborhood. They demanded he remove the photo and threatened legal action for community disruption. Ava read the letter, then quietly wheeled herself out to the porch. She looked stronger, or maybe just more tired of feeling weak. I'm not hiding, she said. Not anymore. Ethan sat beside her, watching the street. A few neighbors waved. One left a small bouquet of flowers at their mailbox. Another dropped off a pie and whispered, "You're braver than any of us." The support was growing, but so was the pressure. Later that week, they received another letter, this time from a firm representing the HOA. A cease and desist. The words were polished, clinical, but the meaning was clear. Shut up or pay the price. Ethan felt something crack inside. He walked into Ava's room and found her medals in a box. All of them, tucked away like shame. He brought them out and laid them on the ramp. You earned these. You bled for them. Let them see. But Ava just stared at the medals, jaw tight. What good are they now? They don't open doors anymore. They close them. Ethan's fist clenched. Then maybe it's time we open one ourselves. That night, he sat with his laptop open, digging through old public records. He wasn't just angry. He was curious. Something about Cordell didn't add up. Why so personal? Why so aggressive? After hours of searching, he found it. A lawsuit. 5 years ago. Another state. Same face, different name. A woman, same sharp jawline, same blazer, was sued for disability discrimination by a retired teacher in a wheelchair. Settled quietly. No admission of guilt. But the photo from the courthouse was unmistakable. Cordell. She changed her name. Started fresh. And now she was doing it again. Ethan stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't about a ramp. It never was. This was personal. And it wasn't over. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The image of Cordell, under a different name, hiding behind polished statements and legal silence, burned in his mind. He printed the court documents, highlighted the matching details, and laid them on the kitchen table like a battle plan. By morning, he'd made his decision. Ava sat quietly, stirring her coffee without drinking it. Her hands were steady now. Not from peace, but from resolve. Ethan slid the folder toward her. She looked down, brow furrowing. That's her, she said finally. No question. She's done this before. Silenced people. Used rules as weapons. Ava closed the folder. So what are you going to do? Call her out in a Facebook post. He shook his head. No. I'm going to file a federal complaint. Ava looked up. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then her eyes softened. You do that for me? Ethan's voice cracked slightly. You gave up your legs for people you never even met. I'm just filing a form. The following day, he went to the local VA office with every document in hand: photos, videos, court records, letters. The woman at the front desk listened in stunned silence. You're not the first, she said quietly, but you might be the last. As the paperwork went through the system, Ethan focused on rebuilding Ava's strength. They started daily walks, or rather rolls around the block. The neighbors began to join. First, it was Tessa with her father's army jacket. Then Mr. Boudreau, a Vietnam vet who hadn't spoken to anyone in years. Ava became a symbol. Not by choice, but by truth. Still, Cordell didn't back down. That week, a city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand. He walked the perimeter of their home, took photos, measured the ramp with practiced indifference. When Ethan asked who sent him, the man simply said, "Anonymous complaint." But Ethan saw Cordell watching from across the street. No clipboard this time. Just arms crossed, lips pursed, waiting for the system to crush them. The inspector handed Ethan a copy of his report. Everything's compliant, he said. Ramp meets federal standards for accessibility. There's no violation. Cordell's face darkened like a storm cloud. But 2 days later, the HOA hit back harder. They froze Ethan's mailbox access, claimed the lock had been tampered with. They blocked his homeowner portal login. A fake dues violation suddenly appeared in the system. $1,200 overdue. Then came the hearing notice. Ethan was to appear before the HOA disciplinary committee. It wasn't just about the ramp anymore. Now they were accusing him of inciting neighborhood unrest. Ava refused to let him go alone. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a beige room with flickering lights and the faint smell of old carpet. The board sat in a row like judges, Cordell in the center. Her smile was a blade. Ethan laid out the documents. He presented the VA's initial support letter. He showed the inspector's clean report. Then, slowly, deliberately, he handed over the court records. The room went still. Cordell's face remained frozen. One of the board members, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, adjusted his glasses and read the file, then looked at her. You told us there were no prior issues. Cordell didn't blink. That was a different matter. Irrelevant here. Ethan leaned forward. You've used your position to systematically target vulnerable residents. You buried your past behind a new name and walked right into another HOA presidency. This ramp isn't the problem. You are. The silence was thick. One of the board members stood up and excused herself. Then the older man said quietly, "We need time to review this." Meeting adjourned. As they walked out, Ava squeezed Ethan's hand. You didn't blink, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Neither did you. That night, someone egged their ramp. No witnesses. No cameras. Just yolk and shattered shells dripping down the rails Ava used to get to therapy. She cleaned it herself, quietly, then went inside. But something in her eyes was different. She wasn't breaking. She was preparing. And neither of them knew it yet, but a letter was already on its way to their home. Not from the HOA, but from a journalist. One who had seen the viral photo and wanted to talk. The letter arrived folded neatly in a tan envelope, marked with the logo of a regional investigative news outlet. Ethan opened it with cautious hands, scanning the words as his heart raced. The journalist's name was Dana Truitt. She'd seen the viral post, read the comments, and started digging. She'd found more than either of them expected. 3 other communities, 3 other names, 3 identical patterns. Cordell, or Clarissa Langley as she was originally known, had a history of burying disabled residents under policy. All quiet settlements. No public records. But Dana had tracked them down. One was a retired firefighter with ALS, another a teenage girl with cerebral palsy, and the last, an elderly man who died before the ramp he'd requested was even approved. I want to tell your sister's story, Dana's letter read. Not for sympathy, for justice. Ethan passed the letter to Ava. She read every word in silence, then nodded. Let's do it. The interview happened 3 days later. Dana arrived with just a notepad, a voice recorder, and eyes that didn't flinch when Ava spoke. She listened. Really listened. As Ava told the story of Afghanistan, of shrapnel, of waking up in a hospital with a nurse crying beside her. She spoke about the smell of burned cloth, about her last mission, and the quiet nightmare of coming home to find herself unwelcome in her own neighborhood. When Ethan showed Dana the court files, her pen froze mid-sentence. "This goes deeper than HOA policy," she said softly. "This is pattern-based discrimination under federal law." Ava raised her head. "Then let's make it public." The article dropped on a Wednesday morning. The title was sharp and impossible to ignore. Asterisk, wounded hero, unwelcome home. Asterisk. Within hours, the story exploded. National outlets picked it up. The HOA's official inbox collapsed under thousands of messages. Veterans groups rallied online, demanding Cordell's resignation. Politicians started tweeting. Cordell responded with a public statement, calm, rehearsed, full of legal precision. She called it a misunderstanding, accused the media of twisting facts. But her words rang hollow. By sunset, 2 of the HOA board members had resigned. That night, Ethan opened the front door to find a crowd outside. Neighbors, local vets, reporters, even a school choir who sang a patriotic song in front of Ava's ramp. No one said a word until she came out. She wore her uniform jacket, her medals pinned high, and the ramp gleamed under soft floodlights placed by a nearby family. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Thank you, Ava." Then another. And another. She didn't cry. Not then. She just raised a hand and nodded. But inside, Ethan saw her breath hitch. He saw her chest rise with something that looked like hope. Later, the state governor's office reached out. They wanted to honor Ava at the Capitol. But just as things seemed to shift toward healing, Ethan received an email that turned his blood cold. Private summons from Cordell's personal attorney. They were filing a defamation suit, $250,000 in damages. For irreparable harm to reputation. Ethan read it 3 times. "It's a scare tactic," Dana told him on the phone. "She's desperate. The pressure's mounting. But this is what predators do. They retreat behind law when the truth comes out." Ava stared out the window, watching a bluebird flit from branch to branch. "She's not going to stop, is she?" Ethan shook his head. "Not until someone makes her." That night, Ava took down the medals from her wall and placed them in a case. She cleaned them with care, then handed them to Ethan. "Mail these to her," she said. "Tell her that they're not just metal. They're everything she's tried to erase." Ethan didn't mail them. Instead, he drove to the HOA building. Cordell's office window was dark, but he knew she was inside. He left the metal case on her doorstep. No note, no message, just the weight of a war she could never understand. 2 days later, a whistleblower email came through. An anonymous HOA staffer. They had proof Cordell had forged signatures on board votes, proof of manipulated complaints, internal documents, dates, and even photos showing Cordell signing violations she'd written before the alleged inspections. Ethan handed everything to Dana. "This is enough to burn it all down," she said. But Ava interrupted. "Not burn. Rebuild." That night, she made a video. Just her, sitting on the ramp. She didn't speak like a victim. She spoke like a soldier. She told her story, not with anger, but with clarity. She asked for dignity, not pity. She called for reform, not revenge. And at the end, she looked straight into the camera. "I came home to fight for peace. I didn't think I'd have to fight for a ramp." The video went viral in under 12 hours. And that's when the federal agents arrived. The agents arrived unannounced. 2 men in suits, plain badges, quiet voices. They asked to speak with Ava and Ethan separately. Inside the living room, the taller agent laid out a packet on the coffee table. It was thin, but precise. DOJ letterhead, Disability Rights Division. He spoke in measured tones, careful not to escalate anything too fast. "We've opened an official investigation," he said. "Based on public interest, media exposure, and newly submitted evidence, we believe there may be cause for federal enforcement action under the Americans with Disabilities Act." Ethan blinked. Enforcement? Against her? The agent nodded. If what's been alleged is proven discrimination, targeted enforcement fraud, then yes, against her and potentially the HOA board as a whole. In the other room, Ava sat still as the second agent asked questions she hadn't spoken aloud in years. What happened when she returned from duty? The surgeries, the adjustments, the silence. He didn't interrupt. He just let her speak. When they left behind something more than just a case number. They left hope. But hope doesn't come without fear. The following morning, Cordell showed up at the edge of their driveway. Not a word. Just standing. Watching. Arms folded. Her mouth was pressed into a flat line. No longer smug. Just calculating. Ava refused to go inside. She sat on the ramp. Back straight. Her medals across her chest. She didn't flinch. Cordell eventually walked away. That night, Ava had a nightmare. Ethan heard her down the hall. Short gasps, fists clenched, whispering names he didn't recognize. He rushed in, shook her gently. She jolted awake, eyes wild. "I thought I was back there," she whispered. "Under fire. Pinned down. Couldn't move." He held her hand. "You're safe," he said. "You're home." But she looked at him with haunted eyes. "Am I?" The next day, the state launched its own inquiry. The local news ran footage of Ava's viral video alongside interviews with two of the HOA whistleblowers. They blacked out their faces, distorted their voices. But what they said was devastating. She targeted people who couldn't fight back. She bragged about it in meetings. She said veterans don't belong in aesthetic communities. And the public responded. Petitions surged. People gathered outside the HOA building with signs. "Ramps are not crimes. Honor our veterans. Cordell must resign." But then came the most unexpected call of all. From Washington, a congressional staffer. The office of a decorated war veteran turned senator. They wanted Ava to testify. Not just about her ramp. About everything. The war. The homecoming. The system that left her behind. The fight she never signed up for. Ethan looked at her, unsure. She just said, "Let them hear me." In preparation, Ava and Ethan worked with the journalist Dana and a veterans legal team. They compiled every document, every image, every bit of evidence. But Ava didn't want just facts. She wanted faces. She reached out to the others, those victims Dana had found. The firefighter. The teenager. The widowed daughter of the man who died waiting. Each one sent a message. A photo. A voice note. Ava collected them all into a digital slideshow. She titled it, "This is Who You Hurt." The day before she was scheduled to fly out, another letter arrived. From Cordell. Type. Clinical. 2 sentences. Effective immediately. I resign from my role as HOA president. All pending actions are hereby withdrawn. There is no apology. No explanation. Just retreat. But it wasn't victory. Not yet. That night, Ava sat on the ramp one last time before her flight. A quiet wind moved through the trees. Crickets hummed softly. The streetlights glowed like watchful stars. Ethan joined her, handing her a thermos of tea. "Scared?" he asked. She nodded. But not of her. Not anymore. He looked out over the yard. Then what? She paused. Of telling the truth. And them not listening. Ethan smiled, tired but proud. Then speak louder. At dawn, they left for the airport. The ramp behind them was no longer a symbol of defiance. It was a declaration. Ava wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all of them. And she was about to walk into the halls of power, not with legs, but with courage. And in the next 48 hours, the world would hear her name. The Capitol building loomed under a gray morning sky, solemn and silent. Inside, rows of chairs filled the hearing room, cameras ready, microphones gleaming beneath the harsh overhead lights. Politicians whispered, aides buzzed around them, as silence hovered just before everything began. Ava sat in her dress uniform, the fabric pressed, medals aligned, hands folded in her lap. She looked small in the giant chamber, but her presence radiated something heavy, something unshakable. When her name was called, she didn't hesitate. The moment she wheeled forward to the microphone, the room fell silent. "I am Staff Sergeant Ava Monroe, she began, her voice steady, firm. Retired. Wounded in Kandahar in 2016. I served 11 years. I received a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and permanent nerve damage that left me unable to walk. The room held its breath. I came home expecting difficulty, she continued. I didn't expect to be told I couldn't belong. That a ramp, my only access to freedom, was considered unsightly. That a neighborhood rule would carry more weight than the sacrifice I made overseas. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Ethan, seated behind her, clenched his fists in his lap. Ava didn't flinch. This isn't just about me. This is about every disabled person who's been told their existence is an inconvenience. It's about power used like a weapon. About policies written in ink but wielded like blades. She tapped a small remote. Behind her, the projector screen lit up. Photo after photo appeared, residents from around the country, victims of similar discrimination. The firefighter with the trach tube. The girl in braces. The photo of a ramp half-finished, abandoned after a lawsuit. Then, finally, her own ramp. Extained. Splattered. Humiliated. One senator leaned forward. Ms. Monroe, are you saying this is systemic? She looked him dead in the eyes. I'm saying it's tolerated. Whispers erupted around the chamber. The chairman called for order. But the damage, or the impact, was done. Ethan saw Dana in the back, taking notes with fire in her eyes. Then Ava closed her testimony with a single, piercing line. I defended freedom in war. I will not surrender it at home. Applause erupted. Spontaneous. Relentless. The chairman banged his gavel, but even he couldn't hide the emotion on his face. That night, Ava's testimony aired on national news, edited into a 3-minute segment that ended with her final words. The video went viral again, but this time it reached veterans groups, legal experts, civil rights activists. Everyone. The floodgates opened. Lawsuits began pouring in across the country against HOAs accused of similar practices. A federal task force was announced. Cordell's name trended nationwide, this time for all the wrong reasons. But while the world was watching, Ava returned home quietly. There was no parade. Just the wind in the trees and the light hitting her ramp like gold. Neighbors left flowers. Kids drew chalk hearts on the sidewalk. One elderly man left a folded flag on her porch. No note. Just the gesture. She stayed inside for a few days, resting, reflecting. Ethan cooked, cleaned, answered media calls she ignored. Until the knock came. A small boy stood at the door. Maybe 10 years old. Nervous. My mom said you were a soldier, he said. Can you talk to my sister? She got hurt last year. She won't leave her room. Ava's eyes welled. She nodded. She followed him down the street, slow, graceful, radiant in silence. That moment wasn't filmed. It wasn't shared. But it was everything. Later that week, she sat on her ramp, watching the sunset. Ethan joined her, holding a letter. It's from the president's office, he said. She opened it. A National Service Medal. Invitation to a private ceremony. Recognition of her advocacy. Ava smiled, but shook her head. I don't need another medal. Ethan looked at her, confused. She pointed to the chalk drawings. The ramp. The boy down the street. This is enough. He didn't argue. As the sun dipped low, casting fire across the sky, Ava closed her eyes. Peace was never something she expected to find. But now it didn't feel so far. Not after everything. Not with people finally listening. Months passed. The season shifted, but the story of Ava Monroe never left the public conscience. Her testimony continued to echo, not just in political halls, but in living rooms, classrooms, and community centers across the country. What started as a neighborhood injustice had become a national reckoning. Laws began to change. A federal bill named the Monroe Amendment was introduced, focused on preventing housing discrimination against disabled veterans and ensuring accessibility, overrides any HOA restrictions nationwide. It passed its first vote with overwhelming bipartisan support. Ethan watched the news that day with quiet disbelief, eyes locked on the television as lawmakers quoted Ava's words like scripture. And yet, Ava herself remained grounded. She declined further interviews. She ignored book deals. She didn't chase fame. Instead, she began to build. At the edge of the neighborhood, just past the cul-de-sac, there was a forgotten plot of land once overrun with weeds. With help from local volunteers, veterans, and even a few children, she transformed it into something new. A garden and center for disabled veterans returning home, with ramps, therapy trails, and a place to gather and just exist. No speeches, no ribbon cutting, just open doors. People came quietly, some in chairs, some with canes, some carrying more pain than they could say. They found shade under the old oak Ava refused to cut down. They drank coffee on benches she helped sand and stain herself. They found belonging. One day, as she was planting a new tree, a woman approached her, middle-aged, nervous, holding a folded envelope. "I used to serve on the HOA board before Cordell," she said. "I should have done something. I didn't. I just followed the rules." Ava stood slowly, dirt on her gloves, sweat on her brow. "You're here now," she said. "That matters." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She left the envelope on the table and walked away. Inside it was a check, a donation, and a note. Forgiveness starts with action. The center grew. So did the ripple. Veterans across the nation began organizing, sharing stories, uncovering quiet patterns of discrimination and bringing them to light. What once was buried was now undeniable, and it all traced back to the woman who refused to take down her ramp. On a crisp autumn morning, Ava returned to the Capitol, not as a witness, but as an honored guest. The Monroe Amendment had passed both houses and was ready to be signed into law. Her seat at the ceremony was beside a young Marine who'd recently lost both legs in an IED blast. He reached over and gripped her hand during the national anthem. "Your story saved mine," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just held on. Back home, Ethan met her at the airport holding a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome home, hero." She rolled her eyes but laughed. "You're such a dork." "Only for you," he grinned. When they got home, they found the ramp decorated with yellow flowers. Children had drawn stars and flags all over the sidewalk. A banner stretched from their mailbox to the porch. "Thank you for never giving up." Ava stood at the base of the ramp for a long time, her eyes wet but her spine straight. This place, once a battlefield, was now a monument. Not to pain, but to purpose. That evening, she recorded one final message. Not for the media, not for Congress, but for the people who had followed her journey step by step. She sat outside, sunset behind her, wind rustling softly through the trees. "Some battles aren't fought with weapons," she began. "Some are fought with dignity, with stubbornness, with a refusal to be erased." She paused, looking at the ramp. "This isn't just wooden nails. It's freedom. It's a path. And everyone deserves one." Her voice trembled slightly as she finished. "To every soul out there fighting quietly, don't stop. You are seen. You are worthy. And no rule, no board, no paper in a mailbox will ever take that from you again." She looked into the camera. "Thank you for walking beside me. Now go build your ramp." As the screen faded to black, a single message appeared. Asterisk-like, "Subscribe, and tell your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it." Asterisk. And somewhere in that dark, after the credits rolled, the world felt just a little less silent.